October 2, 1985. Sergeant Gary Gavin stood at attention. He stood on a North London parade ground. The Enfield factory loomed behind him. He reached out his hands. He took the new weapon, the L85A1. He felt the green plastic. He weighed it in his palms. It felt wrong. The rear-heavy bullpup balance shifted backwards. The magazine sat behind the trigger. Generals watched. Foreign attachés took their notes. The United Kingdom defense budget hit £18 billion that year. Politicians needed a win. They wanted a futuristic rifle. The Ministry of Defense promised perfection. They delivered a compact combat tool. But the field reality hit hard. Soldiers walked on routine patrols. A sudden dry click echoed out. The steel upper cover popped open. Internal parts caught the dirt. Generals praised the first NATO bullpup. Soldiers taped the upper cover shut. Black tape held the weapons together. 50 faults. Engineers logged them fast. 5 short years of testing. Plastic furniture cracked under pressure. Magazine catches dropped rounds randomly. The brass ignored the reports. Bureaucrats buried the negative results. They kept it in service. The rifle stayed 40 years. Soldiers had no choice. They packed their gear. They loaded the weapons. Soldiers marched. Despite the documented failures, British infantrymen slung these defective rifles over their shoulders and marched straight into the Persian Gulf War. 53,000 men went into the desert with broken weapons. In February 1991, the 1st Armored Division crossed the Iraqi border and the problem left the testing grounds. Operation Granby placed 53,000 British troops into an environment that exploited every flaw. Soldiers spent hours stripping mechanisms and applying heavy coats of oil to the moving parts. That oil acted like a magnet for fine desert dust, pulling grit straight into the action. The bolt locked up completely. You could hear the harsh grinding of sand scraping against the steel receiver during patrols. Neither the standard rifle nor the support weapon ever passed a sand trial before deployment. The reality was documented in a leaked military evaluation famously known as the Lancet Report. It recorded exactly what the infantry experienced, cataloging 50 distinct faults during the Gulf War. The Ministry of Defense responded to the leak by declaring the document a complete fabrication. London denied the whole thing. Bureaucrats insisted the troops held a fully reliable platform for the ongoing conflict. When journalists proved the document genuine, the ministry shifted tactics and called it unofficial. Staff officers in Whitehall refused to acknowledge the mechanical failures happening out there. 7 minor problems eventually received attention, but 43 documented faults were deliberately ignored. Regular infantrymen had to live with those administrative decisions in the Iraqi heat. They taped down covers and created messy workarounds for a gun the procurement system deemed acceptable. Special forces had already looked at the troop trials years before and made independent choices. The Special Air Service evaluated the platform, saw the mechanical issues, and rejected the design. They walked away from it. The SAS preferred the American M16 over the weapon forced upon the regular army. Special forces never touched it. Elite units walked away early. They made their choice during the 1986 and 1987 troop trials. Why did the rifle stop shooting in the winter? The flat back of the trigger blade simply compacted the falling snow. Instead of pushing the ice away, the flat metal packed it tight against the frame. The trigger could not move. The hammer could not drop. A wedge profile eventually fixed this. That was a rare weather paralyzed the firing mechanism. The heat destroyed everything else. NATO cold weather testing demands reliability down to -40 degrees Celsius. The new British rifle failed in mild frost. The daily reality for infantrymen meant holding a weapon that actively fell apart. In the jungle, they watched the steel rust in real time. They sprayed standard-issue insect repellent on their arms. The pungent chemical smell filled the humid air. When those treated hands gripped the rifle, the plastic handguards melted. The polymers dissolved right into their palms. The thin aluminum magazines bent under basic combat gear. The feed lips crushed if a soldier dropped them on hard ground. The gas system demanded constant heavy oiling. Soldiers had to soak the moving parts, but that thick lubrication acted like a magnet for desert sand. Grit stuck directly to the wet metal. The internal action ground to a dead halt. In urban patrols, troops strapped the top covers down with heavy tape just to keep them from flying open under recoil. It was a miserable daily routine. The factory knew about every single failure. 7 defects were fixed, 43 were ignored. British troops patrolled narrow Northern Ireland streets. They carried rifles built for 300 meters. Engineers designed that fragile plastic mechanism later. They needed to fix one problem from the late 1960s. Soldiers sat inside armored vehicles. Space was tight, knees touched. Men held the L1A1 SLR rifle. It stretched 1,143 millimeters, too long. The Soviet Kalashnikov measured 880 millimeters. The British gun was almost 30 centimeters longer. Barrels hit metal doors. Weight was another issue. 4.3 kilograms, completely empty. It fired the 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO cartridge. British planners hated this round. They wanted a lighter bullet in 1954. America demanded the heavy round. Britain accepted it. Infantrymen carried a heavy compromise. It lacked automatic fire. Recoil was harsh. Urban combat demanded speed. It required short weapons. Designers built the weapon for open fields. It hit targets at 300 meters. But soldiers fought point blank in Belfast alleys. The Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield finally began developing a shorter replacement. A 20-inch barrel. That became the core requirement for the new design. Back in 1969, the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield received a clear order. They had to cut the weapon's overall length down. The engineers found their answer in the bullpup layout. You put the magazine behind the trigger group. The firing action sits right inside the stock. This layout keeps the barrel long for ballistic accuracy, but shrinks the rifle down to the size of a submachine gun. Perfect for tight spaces. But this ambition soon hit a wall of Allied standards. Initially, Enfield designed the gun around a unique British 4.85mm cartridge. Then came the 1977 NATO ammunition trials. The alliance wanted one single caliber. They looked at the American M16 combat record in Vietnam. That specific experience pushed the bloc toward the Belgian 5.56mm round. Britain lost the caliber debate. Enfield engineers had to tear up the plans and rechamber their new rifle. By 1994, the production lines cranked out 320,000 units. The entire package changed how soldiers fought. Every infantryman now received a 4-power optical sight as standard issue. Who got the contract to save the British infantry rifle? The job went to a German company named Heckler & Koch. 80 million pounds sterling went just to fix the old defects. 320,000 barrels sat in warehouses, and the Defense Ministry simply had no money for a full fleet replacement. Scrapping the entire arsenal meant admitting a huge financial failure to the public, which politicians firmly refused to do. By 1997, officials finally approved a comprehensive modification plan. The government could not actually fix the broken weapons at home. The historic Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield had already shut its doors permanently. Britain had lost its domestic small arms manufacturing capacity during the recent privatization years. Quartermasters packed 200,000 rifles into heavy wooden crates for the long journey. Transport trucks carried those heavy crates across the channel to the German facilities. Heckler & Koch took the overhaul job, though British Aerospace had conveniently purchased the German firm in 1991 for roughly 47 million pounds. German engineers dismantled the pride of the British Army on their own workbenches. They redesigned the cocking handle and strengthened the bolt to prevent the constant jamming. Factory workers applied fresh Teflon coatings to the gas components using their specialized machinery. When a soldier pulled the redesigned charging handle back, the updated Teflon bolt slid smoothly into place without the familiar metallic grinding. The invoice came out to 400 pounds for every single modified weapon. Armorers stamped the receiver with the new L85A2 designation. Technicians kept converting the shipments until 2006. In 1985, Britain made optics standard. That was 15 years early, 15 years before the US Army did the same thing. The patched L85A2 went to Afghanistan. There, a hidden ballistic edge surfaced. Many ignored it. The British gun kept its 20-inch barrel. American forces preferred the lighter M4. The carbine used a 14.5-inch barrel. This length gap changed the math. A longer barrel burns powder longer. The bullet leaves the muzzle faster. It adds 100 meters per second to muzzle velocity. The bullpup layout made this possible. The action sat behind the trigger. The weapon stayed compact. Barrels stayed long. Soldiers fought in Helmand Province. Valleys stretched for kilometers. Distances were vast. Engagements started far away. The 5.56 NATO round needs velocity. It must fragment. Short barrels lose energy fast. The long barrel guaranteed that speed. The tactical irony was bitter. The ballistics were objectively great. The men just distrusted the gun. They hated the platform itself. They liked the reach it provided. It hit hard. Look at the standard Susat scope. It offered 4 times magnification. The sight weighed 400 grams. It sat on every British rifle. American troops lacked that luxury then. They relied on sheer volume. British soldiers placed shots with precision. While British infantrymen engaged targets through magnified glass, a significant portion of American infantry still fought those early battles aiming through basic iron sights. Despite superior ballistics, foreign armies refused to trust the British design. The weapon passed 95% of reliability trials, yet it found 0 buyers overseas. The damage was permanent. The newly modified rifles reached soldiers in Afghanistan in December 2001. Dirt and dust immediately found their way into the actions. Reports of severe jamming came back straight away. The Ministry of Defense blamed the troops for poor maintenance. The troops blamed the rifle. The truth sat somewhere in the middle. The patched weapon actually fired reliably when kept clean. Battlefield mission trials backed up the engineers. The fixed rifle hit that 95% pass rate. Its closest rival stalled out at 47%. The mean rounds between failures climbed to 25,200. The mechanics finally worked. By any standard metric, the infantry had a dependable firearm. But the global arms market never forgets a bad debut. Competing bullpup designs flourished around the world. The French FAMAS and the Austrian Steyr AUG locked down dozens of foreign military contracts. The British weapon stayed home. A ruined reputation blocked any chance of international success. The patched rifle outperformed all competitors in independent reliability tests, but the total number of units sold abroad remains a simple fact. 0. How many rifles remained on the balance sheet by 2025? 165,000. Yet the men at the bleeding edge of the armed forces no longer carry them. The elite Ranger Regiment and Royal Marine Strike Companies bypassed the general budget to acquire the Knights Armament L43A1. They quietly abandoned the bullpup experiment altogether. Meanwhile, back in 2016, the ministry ordered the third modification, the L85A3, delaying the purchase of a new weapon for the regular infantry yet again. Armorers heard the sharp metallic click of modern grips locking onto the newly installed A3 Picatinny rails. The update shaved off a mere 100 grams of weight and added a fresh environmental coating. The formal replacement initiative, known as Project Greyburn, remains stuck in the early concept phase. Planners originally expected to replace the guns much earlier, but they shifted the projected retirement date of the platform all the way back to 2030. The ministry currently holds over 125,000 A2 variants and 40,000 A3 models in military storage. 40 years after Sergeant Gary Gavin traded his reliable SLR for an experimental future, regular soldiers still deal with the same heavy steel. The Ranger Regiment receives conventional pattern rifles. Whitehall bureaucrats read the fresh casualty files from Iraq. The pages document jammed bolts and shattered firing pins. A ministry spokesman steps up to the press podium. He publicly declares the Lancet report a forgery. Purchasing conventional rifles for the Rangers proves a simple fact today. Headquarters always knew the ugly truth about the L85. The Ministry of Defense main building houses roughly 50,000 civil servants. Careers end fast here. Admitting a massive procurement failure means early retirement. A senior official signs the budget estimate for a complete rifle reconstruction, knowing exactly what he is paying for. He files the original field complaints deep into the archive. You hear the quiet rustle of thick paper. He marks the entire dossier as unofficial. He ignores the grim reality of Helmand Province. Out there, summer temperatures hit 45 degrees Celsius, and fine desert sand shreds the gas blocks. But back in London, everything looks fine. The engineers back in the 1940s had a clear vision. The old EM2 program proved a compact bullpup layout worked well in tight spaces. Then, that engineering vision met raw politics. State factories faced imminent closure. Cabinet ministers promised exact production targets to voters. They refused to back down from those numbers. So the army received a defective tool. 40 years later, British infantrymen still carry that exact same rifle. No foreign ally ever purchased this weapon. The British government eventually paid a German firm, Heckler & Koch, to rebuild the entire national stock. They had no other option left. Britain had already demolished the local factories that built the originals. Rebuilding the inventory cost almost as much as the first contract. This allowed the ministry to treat a systemic disaster as a basic technical glitch. Nobody took the public blame. The replacement program remained stuck in the concept phase. The retirement date keeps moving further into the future. Military institutions do not keep broken gear in service because they are blind. They keep it because knowing the truth is completely different from acting on it. A proper new rifle required heavy funding, and the money never appeared.